Hey, welcome Church for Skeptics. Dan Arsenal here. I'm still talking about Christmas. I know it's New Year's Eve right now when I'm filming these, but there's a couple things I left out, and they have to do with the big picture of what we've been talking about, which basically is biblical archaeology. The critics have had a heyday with the New Testament, of course, and a lot of their criticism has been surrounding the birth of Christ. Of course, they don't think it's a miracle that he was born of a virgin, but more than that, they think that the genealogy was wrong. We talked about that last time. Now we're going to talk about the no census idea. Bart Ehrman, good old Bart Ehrman, says that in his book, Jesus Interrupted is the name of the book, and he says there is no evidence for a tax or a census, basically the same thing. You do the census to get the taxes. There was no evidence for a tax issued by Augustus Caesar during the birth or somewhere around the birth of Jesus Christ. I wonder if he's just reading somebody that he likes. We tend to do that. And maybe some historian who doesn't think Jesus even existed, or I don't know. But if you do the research, I'm going to read you at the very end of this, I'm going to read you what Google says about it with artificial intelligence. It's very different than this, so we're going to talk about that. The first thing I want to say this. If Luke says, and I'll read you Luke chapter 2, few verses here. This is the Christmas story, but I'll just read you a couple verses. Luke chapter 2, NIV, verse 1. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. And then he goes in verse 2, presents us a problem. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So you got about 4 different critical errors according to Bart Ehrman here, writing 2 verses here. First of all, no tax. Secondly, Quirinius wasn't the governor. Third, he didn't have to go to his hometown, even if there was a tax, and it goes on and on and on. First point, archaeologists have long used the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts written by Luke, as evidence and historical maps, basically, to find out what happened in the Middle East in the first century. It's so accurate. I mean, he names islands, cities, titles, customs, even the titles customarily given. He gets them all right. Guys like William Albright, guys like Sir William Ramsay, they made their bread and butter using Luke as an historical source. Now, my point is this. How can you say that there is no historical evidence for the tax if Luke says there is? And the truth is, that's what Luke says here. So at the very least, you have to take that into consideration. And I don't know if Dr. Ehrman's not doing his own research through this. Really, you can Google it and find all of this information. Number one. So let's keep going here. By the way, I'll give you a couple. This is parenthetical. Everybody in the first and second centuries thought that there was a tax and that Jesus was indeed born in Bethlehem. The Emperor Hadrian, the Hadrian's Wall, in Britain. Hadrian, he's also the guy who named Israel Palestine. He didn't like the Jews, and so he wanted to name them after the Philistines, their number one enemy. And so he knew where Jesus' birthplace was. It was history by that time, and people made pilgrimages there. So he built over the very house in Bethlehem where Jesus supposedly had been born. Hadrian built a temple for Adonis on top of it. Well, he's no friend of Christianity, but he thought Jesus was born in Bethlehem. The other philosopher, Celsus, he was a sarcastic, interesting guy, and he was very much opposed to Christianity and Jesus, but he thought Jesus was born in Bethlehem too. So you have even the enemies knew where it was. Now, here's the big point. Bart Ehrman is just wrong about this. He's just incorrect that there's no evidence outside of Luke. Now, Luke is evidence itself. if you know what, if you're an archaeologist at least, or a neutral historian. But there's evidence outside of that. Try this. How about from the horse's mouth? That would be Augustus Caesar. He wrote something called, and I'll read it in Latin, that I may mispronounce the Latin. It sounds like to me, Re Geste Divi Augusti. That sounds like Latin to me. Here's what it means. The deeds of the divine Augustus. Well, who wrote that? Augustus wrote it. And Augustus says that he gave the decree for 3 separate censuses during his reign. Partly, he wanted to number the Roman citizens, but there were others that had to be involved in that weren't citizens. But in 28 BC, remember, he became the emperor right about that time, 28, 27 BC. So right off the bat, he gives a census, and it numbered the citizens of the Roman Empire at 4.0 something million people. Then he says, this is Augustus saying in the same document, in 8 BC, now obviously he's going to use the numbers differently. We didn't get AD BC calendars until 500 AD, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we got the date right anyway. So in 8 BC, he also issued a census and came up with 4.2 million Roman citizens throughout the Roman Empire. And then again, I think the last one was 14 AD. That's right, and then they came up with 4.9. So the Roman Empire is growing. But here's the rub here. In 8 BC, wouldn't that be, as Luke says, in those days? What days? What days is he talking about? The birth of Christ. Well, we think the birth of Christ was in 0 AD because that's what it means. Anno Domini means the year of our Lord. And we've always thought that meant the birth date of Jesus, and it does. But here's the problem with that. The 80 BC calendar was contrived in 525 AD, so that's 500 years afterwards, by a monk named Dionysius Exiguus, and I think I spelled that name correctly. And he used, to get the dating right for the years, he used the AD BC idea of everything before Jesus is one side, everything after Jesus is the other side. But he used the Roman consul datings, when the Roman consuls were in business and governing. He used those dates to do the math, and he made a mistake. Of about 7 years, he made a mistake. That means if Jesus were born in 0 AD, or there's no 0 AD, 1 AD, let's say, go back, it's really a 7-year mistake in the reverse, so he really would have been born in 6 or 7 BC. Historians know that. If you read, you can Google it if you want to. Jesus was born about 7 or 8 BC. Wait a minute. Isn't that exactly the same time that Augustus Caesar says that he issued a tax? Did Dr. Ehrman miss this? Did he not? Look at this. This is not hard to find. There's another issue here. What about Quirinius? I'm just going back through the names here. So we got the census is in the wheelhouse. There's no problem with that. It's consensus of the entire world. But then he says this was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Well, we have a lot of information about this guy Quirinius. Let me give you some of it. His real name, Quirinius is his real name, but he has, they like a lot of names back then. I guess we do now too. Publius Sulpicius, or Picicus Quirinius, that's his name. He was born, we know this from inscription. We don't know this from the Bible. We know this from inscriptions and Roman documentation. They said a lot about their guys. He was born in 51 BC and he died in 21 AD. All of these things, he was a military commander, commanded legions, by the way, that's why they call him a legate. And the inscriptions put him in the Roman province of Syria as a military leader from about 12 BC to 12 AD, and then he becomes the official governor of Syria. Syria is a Roman province that includes Judea, so he's in the right place at the right time. The only problem then is that he is a military leader Doesn't seem like he's the actual governor until after that other tax. The second tax that Luke mentions here, by the way, he mentions it again in the book of Acts, is a very localized tax. And now I need to tell you a little bit about Herod and his son Archelaus. This is from Josephus. This is from other historical documents. This is history. All you got to do is Google this too. Herod was he was appointed as king by the Senate, Roman Senate, in 37, I'm pretty sure 37 BC. And he was a client king, which means that he was in league with, he was friendly with the Roman Empire. But when Augustus Caesar came into power right after that, 28, he fell out with Herod because Herod was a homicidal maniac. And history knows that too. And so Herod ushered an unauthorized war against a group called the Parthians, who were from Persia, by the way. And there were battles between Rome and the Parthians, which was what was left of the Persian Empire, rather. But anyway, Augustus wrote a harsh letter to Herodias and demoted him from being a client king to a subject king. Now you are subject to the Roman Empire. Well, what's that have to do with the tax? If Herod was a client king, he was exempt from the census. He could do whatever he wanted with the taxes, and because they were friends, so to speak, and not personal friends probably, then he could give the taxes and give the information to Augustus. But when he is a subject king, now it's the Romans that are going to issue the tax in his area. He's not in charge of it anymore. Well, that's exactly what happened. This problem, guess when it occurred? 9 BC. And so think about it. You have Herod he's an outsider now with the Roman Empire and Augustus Caesar. Now in 8 BC, he issues a tax. Now Herod can't do it, so it has to catch up with the Romans in Judea to get the tax done. Who does that? The military. Well, even though Quirinius was still in the military at that point, he governed league, it would have been his job to issue the tax and the census between battles, of course. But that's exactly what the inscriptions say. That's exactly what the documentation says. Now, here's the problem with the governorship. The word for governor here in Luke chapter 2, it says this. This was the first census. Well, that's one problem too. That word could mean before. If first and before are Greek words that can be interchanged, and there are some verses that do translate the exact same Greek word to before. If that's the case, then this census in 8 BC was before the census when Quirinius was governor. That's one possibility. I don't know that. The other possibility, and I think probability, is this. The word governing is not a noun in the Greek, the word that Luke uses here. Notice what it says. Quirinius was governor of Syria. But it's not a noun. It's not a title. The word governor here in the Greek is a verb. So literally what it would be saying is, this was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governing in Syria. Well, that's exactly what he was doing. He was doing it under the official governor. His name was Silvanus, I think, the governor before Quirinius became governor. But my point is this, he was the guy in charge, he was the guy in front, he was the guy that everybody knew about, so that's why Luke named him instead of this Roman governor that probably never left his house. All this put together solves the problem here. I want to read you, I'll get it somewhere here. We'll close with this. I Googled this. I Googled, is there a contradiction between the Gospel of Luke and Acts with historical data? And here's what AI says. Let me read it to you. No, archaeology has not proven Luke and Acts incorrect. Instead, extensive archaeological and historical findings have largely vindicated Luke's accuracy as an historian, confirming details about people like Pilate, Agrippa, places like Lystra and Iconium, titles like proconsul and customs, Roman census, citizenship procedures that skeptics once questioned, leading scholars like Sir William Ramsay to praise Luke as a first-rank historian. While some, now watch this, this is AI, while some initial debates existed like the census, discoveries have resolved them, showing Luke's deep knowledge of the first century world. AI overview. Maybe Bart Ehrman just didn't get that memo, or maybe he did and didn't want to go back and correct his error in Jesus Interrupted. But either way, the point is that the Gospels and Acts are historically accurate. If Luke says this happened, that's historical evidence. Thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful to you.